Hello, my name is Wyatt. I'm 20 years old and I live in a small town tucked against the foothills in northern Colorado. The kind of place where the summers start slow with cool mornings that smell like pine and damp earth before the heat finally creeps in. I grew up on a ranch a couple hours from here where silence was the norm and talking too much got you funny looks. That's probably why I'm quiet by nature. Words feel like they cost something, so I save them. After high school, I didn't bother with college. Books and lectures weren't for me. I needed my hands in something real. So I took a job as a laborer on a new housing development going up on the edge of an older neighborhood. It's basic work, mixing concrete, hauling rebar, laying block. The pay's steady, enough for the tiny one-bedroom I rent above a garage downtown. The place is nothing special. Just a bed, a hot plate, a table with one chair and a stack of library books on construction techniques. I keep a worn notebook in my back pocket, jotting down measurements, sketches of joints and supports, little things the older guys teach me. One day I tell myself I'll use it to build something that lasts. Most days blur together. Up at 5, coffee black and strong, drive my beat-up Ford pickup to the site. The crew's good, mostly guys in their 40s and 50s who've been pouring foundations since before I was born. They rib me for being the kid, but they show me tricks. How to feel when soil's compacted right. How temperature changes can crack a slab if you're not careful. I listen more than I talk. It's honest work. My muscles ache in a good way at the end of the day. And when I wash off the dust in a cold shower, I feel like I've earned my spot in the world. That afternoon changed everything, though I didn't know it right away. It was late spring sliding into summer, the air thick, with the scent of wildflowers pushing through the cracked sidewalks in the old neighborhood next door. The site was buzzing, trucks beeping in reverse, hammers echoing. But I was working the back section, away from the noise, mixing a batch of mortar for the foundation wall we were raising. The spot was close to a weathered wooden fence separating the construction from the residential lots. Tall grass poked through the slats on the other side, and beyond that, I could glimpse rooftops of houses built decades ago, solid and settled. I was focused, shovel scraping against the wheelbarrow, when a voice cut through the rhythm. "Don't pour there yet. The soil's not compacted enough. Rain comes, it'll settle uneven." I stopped mid-scoop and looked up. There was a woman standing on the other side of the fence, leaning slightly against it like she'd been watching for a while. She looked to be in her late 30s, maybe pushing 40, hard to tell exactly, but there was a quiet elegance to her that made the dusty site feel suddenly out of place. Slender build, light brown hair tied back in a loose knot, wearing a simple linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She held a rolled-up set of papers in one hand, like blueprints or sketches. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my arm, probably smearing dirt across my face. "Thanks," I said, surprised how spot-on her advice was. None of the crew had noticed that patch yet. "You know about this stuff?" She gave a small, almost sad smile. "Used to be an architect, gave it up. But old habits die hard. I still notice foundations." There was something in her tone, a weight behind the words, like she wasn't just talking about concrete. Her eyes were sharp, green or hazel maybe, catching the late afternoon light in a way that made them look deeper than they should. Not flirtatious, just observant. Like she'd seen too much and was still sorting through it. I nodded, not sure what else to say. "Appreciate it. Save me a headache tomorrow." She lingered for a second, then added, almost to herself, "I used to think, no one cares about the foundation anymore. Everyone just looks at the facade." She said it softly, gaze drifting to the half-built wall behind me. It hit me strange, not rude, but personal. Like she'd let slip something she hadn't meant to keep inside. I felt it land in my chest, that sense of shared quiet. Most people chatter about nothing. She said something real without trying. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, shovel in hand. "Well, thanks again, ma'am." "Eleanor," she corrected gently. "Just Eleanor." "Wyatt," I replied. She nodded once, then turned back toward her house. A modest 2-story with peeling white paint and overgrown flower beds that looked like they'd once been loved. I watched her go, the way she walked steady but careful, like she was measuring each step. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at the table with my notebook open. Usually, I'd sketch load-bearing ideas or note mix ratios. But instead, I wrote her name, Eleanor. Then I stared at it, wondering why it felt important. The foundation thing stuck with me, not just the advice, but the way she said it. Like she'd built things once as solid things and someone had torn them down anyway. I didn't sleep much, kept thinking about that fence, that voice cutting through the noise. I'd been content with my routine, my small life, but something about her words made me question it, made me want to build better, not just walls, something that holds. After that day, I couldn't stay away from the back section of the site. I'd volunteer for every job near that wooden fence, even if it meant hauling extra loads or cleaning up scrap that no one else wanted. The guys noticed, gave me shit about it. Kids got a crush on the dirt back there. But I just shrugged it off. Truth was, I was waiting, hoping for another glimpse of Eleanor, another word from her that cut through the noise like it had before. She showed up more often than I expected. Not every day, but enough that it stopped feeling like coincidence. She'd stand on her side of the fence, arms folded on the top rail, watching the progress. Sometimes she'd point out something small, a form board that wasn't level, a spot where the rebar spacing was off by an inch. Her advice was always right, quiet and precise, like she'd built 100 houses in her head even if she wasn't swinging the hammer anymore. I'd nod, make the fix, and she'd give that same faint smile before disappearing back inside. I started talking to her more. Short stuff at first. Hot one today. Or, that storm last night didn't wash anything out, did it? She'd answer, voice low and steady, with a hint of something dryly funny underneath. Once, when I was struggling with a stubborn batch of concrete that wouldn't level right, she leaned over the fence and said, "Add a little more water, but not too much. It's thirsty, not drowning." I did it, and it worked perfect. I looked up and caught her eyes, those sharp, thoughtful eyes, and muttered, "You're good at this." She shrugged. Muscle memory. It went on like that for weeks. Me finding excuses to linger near the fence, her appearing like she knew I'd be there. I learned bits about her without asking directly. She lived alone in that house, no kids that I ever saw, no husband coming or going. The flower beds were overgrown because she didn't have the energy for them anymore, she'd said once offhand. But she kept the inside neat from what I could see through the windows, books stacked high, papers everywhere. Then came the rain. Not a downpour, just that steady Colorado drizzle that soaks through everything slow. The crew knocked off early, grumbling about mud, and slipped schedules as they piled into their trucks. I stayed behind to cover the fresh pour with tarps, not wanting it to pit. By the time I finished, I was drenched, shirt clinging to my back, boots heavy with sludge. I was hunkering under the partial roof of the equipment shed when her back door opened. "Get in here before you catch something," she called out. No hesitation in her voice, just matter of fact. I hesitated for half a second, me, covered in mud, tracking into her house. But she was already holding the door wide. So I went. The inside smelled like orange peel and old wood, warm and inviting in a way my apartment never was. Bookshelves lined the walls, overflowing with architecture texts, sketch pads, rolls of blueprints tied with string. There were framed drawings on the mantel, beautiful lines of houses that looked like they belonged in magazines, and a few half-finished oil paintings leaning against the couch. It felt lived in but lonely, like the house that remembered better days. She handed me a towel from the bathroom. "Dry off, I'll make tea." I stood there in her kitchen, rubbing my hair, feeling too big and clumsy in the small space. She moved easy, filling a kettle, pulling mugs from a cabinet. No small talk at first, just the sound of water boiling and rain tapping the window. We sat at the table, steam rising between us. She wrapped her hands around her mug like it was anchoring her. "You don't have to stand out there getting soaked for that concrete," she said finally. "It's my job." She nodded, eyes on the tea. Then, quieter. "I used to stand out in worse. Site visits in the snow, rain, whatever. Back when I still had projects." I waited. She didn't offer more right away, so I asked, careful, "What happened?" "If you don't mind me asking." She exhaled slow. "I designed homes, big ones mostly, for people with money who wanted statements. I loved it. The way a good foundation could make everything else possible. Then I got married. He was in the business too, developer. I thought we were partners. Her voice stayed even, but her fingers tightened on the mug. Turned out he just wanted my ideas. Took them, put his name on everything. The firm we worked for sided with him. Easier that way. Divorce cleaned me out. Lost the portfolio, the reputation. Everything. She looked at me then, direct. So I quit. Moved here. Thought quiet would fix it. I didn't know what to say. Sorry felt too small. So I just said, that sucks. A ghost of a smile. Yeah, it does. The rain picked up outside, drumming the roof. We sat in it for a minute. What about you? She asked. Big dreams? I shook my head. Not really, just want to build something solid. A house someone comes home to and feels safe in. Calls it theirs, you know? Nothing fancy. Her eyes softened, really softened for the first time. Like I'd said something that reached past the cracks she'd patched over. She stared into her tea a long moment. You still care about the foundation, she said quietly. Most people don't. They just want the pretty parts. I felt heat rise in my face, not sure why. Guess someone taught me right. She looked up again, and there was something new in her expression. Curiosity, maybe even warmth. We talked more after that. Not deep stuff, just easy things. How she liked the way light hit foothills at dusk, how I was saving for tools of my own. She showed me an old sketchbook, pages filled with designs she'd never built. Beautiful stuff, clean lines, thoughtful spaces. Looking at you work these weeks, she said at one point, makes me think, maybe there's still hope for good work. I left when rain let up, but not before she pressed a leftover muffin into my hand. For the road. Walking back to my truck, soaked but not caring less, I realized the pull wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was deeper. I wanted to be the reason she picked up a pencil again. Wanted to prove that foundation still mattered, to her, to me, to whatever this was becoming. But there was that gap between us, the years, the hurts she carried. I felt it even then. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about those cracks in the walls, and in her. The visits became routine, the kind of routine I didn't know I needed until it was there. I'd finish work, shower off the day's grime, grab something simple from the bakery downtown, fresh bread, or those cinnamon rolls she once mentioned liking, and head to her place. She'd leave the back door unlocked on the days she knew I'd come, or maybe it was always unlocked for me. I'd knock anyway, out of respect, and she'd call from inside, "It's open." We'd sit in her kitchen or out on the porch when the evenings cooled. Talking turned into something deeper. She'd pull out old sketchbooks, yellowed pages filled with designs that never built, homes with wide windows for mountain views, foundations dug deep into rocky soil. I'd spread my notebook on the table, showing her the rough sketches I'd started making, inspired by the tricks she'd taught me. We'd lean over them together, her finger tracing a line while mine pointed out a structural fix. It felt collaborative, like we were building something without ever lifting a hammer. One evening, after a long day where the crew had poured a slab that set perfect thanks to her tip about timing the mix, I showed up with a rolled-up sheet of paper. My hands were shaking a little as I unrolled it on her table. It was a drawing I'd worked on for weeks. My dream house, nothing grand. A simple two-story with a wraparound porch, thick walls for insulation against Colorado winters. A foundation reinforced the way she always emphasized. But in the corner, I'd written something personal. You could be the architect, but I want to lay every brick so you can walk into happiness again. She stared at it for a long time, silent. The room felt heavy, the only sound the tick of her wall clock and the distant hum of crickets outside. Eleanor, I said, voice low, I don't know what to call this, but since that day at the fence, you've made me want to be better. Stronger, good enough to stand next to you. Her eyes met mine, glistening. She reached out, touched the edge of the paper like it might vanish. Wyatt, she whispered, you're so young. You've got your whole life to build with someone who can start fresh, not someone still picking up pieces. I shook my head, stepping closer. You're not broken. You're the strongest person I know. I just want us to stand solid, together. She didn't pull away when I took her hand. For a moment, it felt like we were on the edge of something real, something that could hold. Her fingers tightened in mine, and I thought, this is it. This is where the foundation sets. But the next day, she wasn't at the fence, or the day after. I texted once, simple. Everything okay? No reply. The back door stayed locked when I tried the handle one evening. Her curtains were drawn tight, house dark even as the sun set. I asked a neighbor casually while grabbing mail. She said Eleanor had been keeping to herself, barely leaving the house. Work suffered. I'd zone out mid-mix, forget to check levels, get snapped at by the foreman for sloppy ties on rebar. The guys asked what was wrong. I brushed it off with, just tired. But nights were the worst. Lying in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. Had I pushed too hard? Was the age thing a wall she couldn't climb? She was right. I was young, barely out of my teens with no real scars. She carried a marriage's worth of betrayal, a career stolen. What could I offer except enthusiasm and calloused hands? I'd drive past her house after shifts, slow, not stopping, lights off most nights. Once I saw a shadow move behind the curtains and my heart jumped. Then nothing. I stood at that damn wooden fence one midnight, hands gripping the rail until splinters bit in, whispering to the dark house like an idiot. I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. The doubt gnawed. Part of me screamed to walk away, find someone my age uncomplicated who didn't come with ghosts. But the bigger part, the one that ached when I thought of her sketches gathering dust, wouldn't let go. She wasn't just a woman behind a fence anymore. She'd become the reason I pushed harder at work, studied harder in my notebook. The reason I believed in foundations that lasted. A week stretched into 10 days. No word. I threw myself into the job, volunteering for overtime, anything to keep my mind off the silence. But every pour of concrete reminded me of her voice that first day. Every level check echoed her precision. I knew I'd crossed a line by saying it out loud, by putting it on paper. But I didn't regret it. I just regretted that it scared her away. Still, something in me refused to believe it was over. If she needed space to breathe, I'd give it. But I wouldn't disappear. Not when I'd seen the cracks in her walls and how badly I wanted to be the one to fill them right. One way or another, I'd find a way back to that fence, to her door, to let her know the offer stood. That Sunday, I couldn't take the silence anymore. 10 days had turned into 12, and everyone felt like a crack widening in something I hadn't even fully built yet. Work was a blur. I'd show up, go through the motions, but my mind was always on that dark house next door. I told myself if I didn't do something, I'd regret it forever. So after my shift, still in dusty jeans and boots, I walked straight to her front door and knocked. Hard, 3 times. No answer. I waited, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. Knocked again. Nothing. The curtains didn't even twitch. I stepped back staring at the house like it might explain itself. That's when Mrs. Bahay Hargrove from 2 doors down came out with her dog, giving me that nosy neighbor look. She's not there, dear, she said, clipping the leash. Saw her head out early. Something about her old studio downtown. Been going there a lot lately, all by herself. Studio. The one she'd mentioned once or twice. The place where she'd worked before everything fell apart. I knew the building. It was an old brick warehouse converted for artists and designers years back, now mostly empty. I thanked the lady, jumped in my truck, and drove the 15 minutes into the quieter part of town. The studio was on the 2nd floor of a rundown building, windows papered over from the inside. The main door was propped open with a brick, ironic, I thought. I climbed the creaky stairs, boots echoing too loud. At the end of the hall, one door was ajar, light spilling out faint and yellow. I pushed it open slow. Eleanor was there, alone on her knees, scrubbing mold from the baseboards with a rag and a bucket. Her hair was loose and messy, strands sticking to her forehead with sweat. She wore old overalls splattered with paint, sleeves pushed up, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. The space was a ghost. Dust-covered drafting tables, rolled blueprints yellowing in corners, shelves of forgotten models gathering cobwebs. It smelled like neglect and old paper. She didn't look up right away, but I knew she heard me. I still found you, I said, voice rougher than I meant. She stopped scrubbing, sat back on her heels, and finally met my eyes. No surprise there, just exhaustion and something softer underneath. A tired smile tugged at her lips. I'm not running, she said quietly. I'm just scared of staying, scared I'll need you too much. The words hung there, raw. I crossed the room in a few steps, knelt in front of her, not caring about the grime on the floor. Took the rag from her hand and set it aside. You think I don't get scared? I said. Every day since you shut me out, I've been terrified this was it. That I'd said too much, pushed too hard. But Eleanor, if you don't need me, I'll still be here waiting. But if you do, I took her hands, dusty and damp. I'll never leave, not ever. Her breath caught, eyes filled, spilled over. She didn't wipe the tears, just let them fall, shoulders shaking for the first time since I'd known her. No walls, no holding it in. She leaned forward, forehead against mine, and cried like something long frozen was finally thawing. I wrapped my arms around her, pulled her close. She felt small in that moment, but strong too, like the weight she'd carried alone was shifting, just a little onto me. We stayed like that on the dirty floor, her sobs quieting into breaths against my shirt. No big speeches. No fixing everything right then. Just holding on like we were both learning how again. Eventually, I helped her up. We didn't talk much on the drive back. Her in the passenger seat, staring out the window, my hand on the seat between us. When we got to her house, I walked her inside, made sure she was okay. She poured us water with shaking hands, and we sat on the porch steps as the sun dipped low, painting the hills gold. The air was cooler, crickets starting their evening chorus. She leaned against me finally, head on my shoulder. I thought if I disappeared, she said softly, you'd find someone easier. Someone without all this mess. I shook my head. There is no easier, not when it's you. She turned, looked at me, really looked, and I saw the fear receding, replaced by something steady. Trust, maybe, or the start of it. Before I left that night, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small brick I'd grabbed from the site that morning. Smooth on one side, rough on the others. Just a piece of the foundation we were building next door. This is the first one I saved, I said, pressing it into her palm. If you want, I'll use it to build something with you, whatever you need. She closed her fingers around it, eyes shining again, but this time with something like hope. Nodded once. I walked away lighter than I'd felt in weeks. The biggest wall wasn't the age or her past, it was her fear and my doubt. We'd cracked it together that day. In that dusty studio on those porch steps, we'd laid the first real layer. Whatever came next, I knew the ground beneath us was solid now. Because we'd chosen it. A year passed like that. Quiet, steady, the way good foundations set without anyone noticing until they're unbreakable. I'd enrolled in night classes for construction management at the community college downtown, paying my way with overtime on bigger sites. The work was harder, the math tougher, but every time I nailed a calculation or passed a test, I'd think of her. Eleanor had started drawing again. Not big projects, just small renovations for locals, a cabin remodel here, a kitchen addition there. She turned the old studio into her space, dusting off the tables, hanging new lights. I'd help on weekends, hauling materials or holding boards while she measured. Watching her pencil move across paper again, confident and sure. It was the best feeling I'd known. We kept it private. No announcements, no changing relationship statuses online that neither of us had anyway. The town was small, people talked if they wanted, but no one pried into our lives. I'd park my truck a block away some nights, walk over like I was just borrowing a tool. But mostly it was enough to be together without the world weighing in. Mornings became my favorite. I'd finish early shifts, stop at the bakery for whatever was fresh, blueberry muffins or those cheese danishes she loved, and knock on her door. She'd answer in her robe, hair tousled from sleep, smiling like she'd been waiting. We'd sit at her kitchen table, coffee steaming, and I'd tell her about the day's pour or a tricky beam placement. She'd listen, then sketch ideas on napkins, ways to make it stronger, better. Simple stuff, but it felt like partnership. Evenings, she'd leave the porch light on, a signal. I'd see it from the site as the sun dropped behind the hills, that warm glow pulling me like home. She'd have ginger tea ready, the kind that warmed you from the inside on cold nights. We'd sit on the steps or the old swing, talking low about nothing and everything, her hand in mine or her head on my shoulder. No rush, no big plans discussed, just being. One crisp fall evening, a year almost to the day from that studio moment, we were out on the porch again. Leaves turning gold, air sharp with the promise of snow. I was 21 now, but still felt like that kid at the fence sometimes. I turned to her, the question that's been building for months finally out. If I stay this way forever, just the guy who mixes concrete and dreams small, would you still choose me? She didn't answer right away. Set her mug down, took my hand, traced the calluses like she always did. If you keep seeing the foundation when everyone else only looks at the paint and windows, she said, voice soft but sure, I'll choose you every time, every day. It wasn't poetry, it was us, real, grounded. We didn't get married. No ring, no courthouse, no big party with friends who would have asked too many questions. We didn't need it. The life we built was in the details, the way she'd leave a new pencil on my dashboard when mine wore down, or how I'd reinforce her studio shelves without her asking. The way we'd fall asleep tangled on her couch after long days, waking to the smell of coffee she'd set on timer. Some nights, I'd catch her staring at an old photo on the mantel, her in younger days, standing proud next to a model of one of her stolen designs. She'd touch the frame, then look at me and smile. Not sad anymore, just grateful. I'd lie awake sometimes, her breathing steady beside me, and think about that first day. The voice over the fence, the woman who saw cracks before they spread. She'd taught me that real strength isn't no damage, it's building anyway. And me? I'd shown her that someone could still care about the parts no one sees. We weren't a house with no facade to impress the world, no grand entrance, no perfect siding, just deep roots, solid footings, walls that held because we poured everything into them. From the ground up. People might call it unconventional, might whisper about the years between us, or how it started with a fence and a warning. But they don't see the warmth inside, the way her laugh fills rooms now, the way my hands don't ache alone anymore. I still work construction, she still designs. But every evening when that porch light comes on, I know where home is. It's not a place, it's her. It's us. And that's all the foundation we need.